From the Beaver County Auto Studios here high above Market Square, I'm Dan Kingerski. And check out Beaver County Auto as you start your car shopping for the spring and the summer. Heck, even do it now and probably get a pretty good deal. Visit beavercountyauto.com. They'll make a Bub Beaver believer out of you. Hi, I'm Dan Kingerski. Welcome to another live Penguins chat here on Pittsburgh Hockey Now. So, I guess we're on a couple of places. The YouTube channel, Pittsburgh Sports Live, and on the website, Pittsburgh Hockey Now. Hopefully it's all working. I'm going to hop on the YouTube page. Happy that you're all with us. Please use the chat board. Your comments, your questions really do and will dictate where we go with the show. So let me pull up that so I can see all of your comments, even some of the ones I want to see. We're building a nice little following here, and just, where is it? I can't get there from here. Anyway, let's talk about a couple issues I want to get to on the show. We're going to get to Derick Brassard and Phil Kessel. The situation is coming to a head. The whispers are bouncing off the walls now and getting a little bit louder. I don't want to get into that. I want to talk about Matt Murray as well. Hold my feet to the fire on that, because I hate when I bring up something I want to talk about and then through the course of an hour, I forget to talk about it. Let's make sure we talk about Matt Murray. And I want to get to the NHL trade market. I know you want to talk about what places, what players. It's really going to be crazy this year. Perhaps not in terms of the volume of movement, but in terms of the big-name players who are available and will be available, in terms of the discussion. Teams are going to actually have their pick of great players, good players, which one they want, what deal is better for the buyer, not the seller this year. And it's really I don't know if this is an aberration or if this is where we're going to be headed now that teams are dishing these big contracts in free agency and the game is changing faster than the thinking. And I think there's a few GMs who are realizing quite quickly that their thinking isn't the same as it was 12 months ago or 24 months ago when they signed X or Y players. So we will very much get into the NHL trade market. And I wanted to pull up a couple of the big boards here real quick. Let's start with Derick Brassard. Yeah, what do you say? And by the way, I apologize. I'm doing this a little bit on the fly today. There's just never enough hours in the day for me. So I'm actually not, I don't actually have the all the cool photos and such loaded in to the show. Instead, oh man, I'll be trying to move them as we go. And we'll see if the garbage cooperates. Because here's what I'm looking at right now. I'm trying to get the good photo of Derick Brassard up. Instead, we'll pull up his hockey DB page. Let's just do that, shall we? Right here. Let's talk about Derick Brassard. 6'1", 202 pounds. Look, there's just no question about Brassard's talent, about his ability, but he's got 13 points in 34 games, as you can see right there. 13 points in 34 games, and he's a -3, which is a terrible stat to quote, but in this case, it's probably quite accurate. Now, I can tell you with a high degree of confidence, the Pittsburgh Penguins are, their patience is wearing thin. They know Brassard is a good player. There are people down on Fifth Avenue who are starting to wonder if he's all in in terms of winning. Good teammate. Don't misunderstand there. So no one thinks he's sandbagging. But there's some question if Derick Brassard really understands what the Penguins need. That's a better way to phrase it. If that he understands truly what the Penguins need from him. And the patience is wearing thin because the Penguins need him now. They need 3 and 4 full lines going. You see Malkin. You see Malkin coming along. Let me get me back on there. And I can talk about that. You see the goaltending coming along. You see the defense. The Jack Johnson-Marcus Pettersson pairing has really bolstered the Penguins' defense. The glaring weak spot is their third line. Last night, for example, against the Florida Panthers, and it's not like the Panthers have 4 deep lines. Brassard and Kessel had Corsi's of 20, or wait, Brassard was 23%, Kessel was at 26%. Scoring chances weren't much better. They had their lunch taken from them, and they didn't even push back against the Panthers. Now, that's on both of them. I know Pittsburgh's got a lovely blind spot for Phil. That's on both of them. Now, however, a big caveat here, the Penguins have already baked the Phil Kessel casserole. They know there are some times when Phil is just not going to be top-notch Phil, but they expect come crunch time that Kessel will be the very best Phil. And so they live with times like these. Do they want Kessel to step forward? Absolutely. That's why Mike Sullivan benched him in Carolina back on December 22nd, because it was getting too bad. He needed to kick Kessel in the butt, and Kessel responded with 9 points in 3 games and even started chipping in 5-on-5 offense. But the last couple games, I guess a couple games ago, Kessel and Brassard finally connected. And you thought, okay, here they go. But then they turned in a stinker like last night. Watch Derick Brassard's name on the trade market, although I don't know if you'll see it coming. I think the Penguins are lining themselves up very well for a if it doesn't kick in here real soon with Brassard and Kessel, if it doesn't kick in, I think the Penguins have a couple options on the market and have explored those options where you might be very well surprised. All right, let me hop on the chat. Mutation, how are you? Brian is here with us, too. I pushed it back to 12:30, by the way, and I know I screwed with everybody instead of doing it at noon. But we realized people want to go to lunch at noon, and our numbers through the hour would just keep going up. So we pushed it to 12:30 today as a bit of an experiment. Mutation's got the question, what was your opinion on the goaltender interference last night? Oh, man. That was absolutely at 50.0% both ways. McCann's feet were in the white. His backside in Matt Murray's mask. You really couldn't have a tighter judgment call on that. And since the officials ruled goal on the ice, that call had to stand. If the officials had said no goal on the ice, that call would have stood as well. I mean, yeah, Murray was interfered with, but it really was exactly on the line of where a goaltender is allowed to play his position unimpeded, and by coming forward to the top of the crease, Murray also engaged in contact with McCann, who was coming back into him. Geez. Sometimes I'm glad I'm not an NHL official, huh? Brian, I'm doing very well. Thanks for asking. Let's see here. All right, I'm just trying to get all the questions. I really do like when you hop on the chat. And I was trying to pull up the trade board. I think The Athletic is the one I'm going to use this year. Really only because I really like the work that Craig Custance does. Nothing against the boys at TSN. That's just the one I'm going to ride this year. There's going to be some big names that the Penguins simply cannot afford. I've chuckled at some of the names being attached to the Penguins on some of the lesser trade boards, right? Besides, I mean, let's just do just common sense here, folks. The Penguins probably would deal Derick Brassard if it made them better, well, like a lot of players, but maybe actively trying to make themselves better by seeing who Derick Brassard could make better and who could make them better, right? That would be a pure hockey trade. Besides Brassard, what do the Penguins have really to give at this point? I was high on the Matt Zuccarello bandwagon a month ago. But with the emergence of, or I should say the reemergence of Brian Rust, where would you put Zuccarello? You're not going to put him on the first line with, you're not going to bump Jake Gensel. The only place I could see would be on the third line. And what would you do with Tanner Pearson? And then you'd lose Zuccarello. You'd have to give a real asset for Zuccarello. And then maybe you lose a Tanner Pearson whom you've got control of for the next 3 years. I don't see how Zuccarello fits anymore. I did when Rust was just snake bitten. But now that Brassard is, I have to be careful. For those, for you PHN Extra subscribers, I took the gloves off last night in the report card. I spared no feelings, shall we say. I do have to be a little bit careful in a free public domain on exactly what I say, because I am also a dual role as a reporter in addition to kind of a columnist and an analyst. Brassard's play is pushing him out of town. He really has to pick it up because the Penguins are married to Phil Kessel. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. The Penguins are married to Phil Kessel, and Kessel is married to the Penguins. I would be shocked if the Penguins were engaged in serious talks over Kessel. They dipped their toe in the water. They tested the market to see if moving him back in November would make them better. You can see how long that lasted. They dipped their toe in, realized they couldn't get better by dealing Kessel, and that was the end of the matter, right? A guy like Zuccarello, he would be, I think, a better third liner for the Penguins than say, Tanner Pearson or Phil Kessel. But Penguins Inn is full. And you don't want to get a guy and stick him in the manger. They did that with Derick Brassard, essentially, and it hasn't worked out so well. And that would really be one of the big reasons to get I was pushing to get Zuccarello, was because I thought that Matz and Brassard would be happy to play together. And you'd see the best Brassard, which we've only seen sparingly in Pittsburgh. Let me jump back here. Medina's got a question. Medina, it's Medina, right? Because there's actually a town in Ohio called Medina, spelled the same way. Medina, that kind of answers your question about Zuccarello. What of the defense issue when Schultz comes back? Who sits, who plays? I've got a sneaking suspicion as well that Jim Rutherford will have solved that problem by then. Jim Rutherford, not Mike Sullivan. Wink, wink, nod, nod. However, as it sits right now, if Schultz comes back, the Penguins would indeed have 9 healthy defensemen. I think at that point, Ruedel would be sacrificed via waivers if they couldn't get a later round pick for him. You know, you start talking a 5th-round pick, maybe 6th, for a 7th defenseman. That brings you down to 8, though the Penguins have carried 8 defensemen all season. Perhaps that does solve the problem. Who plays, however? Schultz obviously slides in. Schultz also changes the equation, too, Medina. In so much as Jamie Alexiak has been a healthy scratch the last couple of games in favor of Juuso Riikola. And that's in part, I think, because Riikola is better on the right side than I think Alexiak is. But with Schultz, recall the great chemistry that Alexiak and Schultz have shown and what a really stout pairing they have been in the past. So I think Schultz's return next month puts Alexiak in the top 4. And then you still ride that Pettersson-Johnson pairing as your number 3. I didn't realize this in real time last night, only looking at the stats. That, let me see if I can pull them up as well. The Penguins really sheltered Johnson and Pettersson last night. I was thinking, wow, Pettersson played really well. But they had low ice time last night. We're talking 14 minutes worth, which is interesting to me. Johnson had a couple rough games, and the pairing had a couple rough games, and maybe so that's what they're going back to that sheltered approach. I do want to see what those two can do without the tethers. Let them go. And you know what? If either one sinks or swims, we know a whole lot more about the team. And I think we're learning a bit more about Riikola over the last week, 2 weeks as well. I think he's at his top end in terms of this season, what the Penguins, what you can expect to see from Juuso Riikola. I think he's going to need to finish the season, decompress, get, that exit interview, say work on these few things. I don't know that anybody knows where his top end really is in terms of his career. Because don't forget, he's a 24-year-old rookie that 31 teams, including the Penguins, have passed on for the last several years. At any point over the last 4 years, anybody could have had Juuso Riikola. Be it draft, be it free agent. And it wasn't until this past summer that the Penguins scooped him up. So I'd love to tell you he can be X or Y, but that question I don't think will be answered for another year yet. This time next year, I think we'll know a lot more about Riikola. And don't forget, because he's on an entry-level contract and has played, I'm 99% sure the Penguins could send him to Wilkes-Barre Scranton without penalty. So there's that as well. If the Penguins decide to keep Ruedel as their 8th defenseman and keep Riikola playing, you could see that occur as well. Oh, Brian says, what are my thoughts on the stats that Ovi and Sid both started their careers on the same night, and now 4,844 days later, they are tied in points. I didn't know that. Ovi has played 1,045 games, Sid 904. What are my thoughts on the stat? That's really cool. That's kind of like Hamilton. Was it Hamilton and John Adams? No, Hamilton and Jefferson. Born on the same day and died on the same day. Crosby and Ovechkin will forever be linked in hockey history, right? Because they had the great rivalry, and Sid won the early Stanley Cup, and Sid had to go through Ovechkin to get there. Ovechkin had to go through Sid and couldn't do it until 2018. I think it's one of the great stories of NHL history, quite frankly. In terms of players, there's not a lot of comparison, right? Sid is one of the 10 best of all time, probably maybe cracking that top 5 with 3 Stanley Cups in a salary cap era. And Ovechkin is simply one of the great goal scorers of all time. Maybe the best I've ever seen in terms of a goal scorer, pure goal scorer. Better than Brett Hull, Teemu Selanne. Better than, certainly, a young Alexander Mogilny. Paul Kariya. Ovechkin's the best I've ever seen. That shot, the size and physicality, the determination. I mean, he doesn't show determination on 200 feet of ice like Sidney Crosby does. But when you point Alexander Ovechkin forward, and he's got the puck, and he wants a goal, it's damn tough to stop him, isn't it? How are you, Ellen? Glad that you could join us here. So I'm trying to pull up the big board here on The Athletic of the trade, and I rolled through it a bit this morning. Quick note, St. Louis returned to PPG Paints last night to scouts either the Penguins or Florida. St. Louis has not been in attendance recently. The Penguins have not been in St. Louis. Make of that what you will. We present the scouts. You always take that with a grain of salt. It's fun to consider. It's fun to ponder. It's fun to watch. And I think when you start seeing bigwigs show up, for example, we knew the Penguins' chief scout, Derek Clancy, was in Anaheim for a couple or a few days. Less than a week later, you have the Pettersson for Sprong deal. Anaheim is lovely this time of year and lovely in November. But obviously, when a chief scout shows up, antennae also go up. The Blues haven't sent management to Pittsburgh as they did last year. And as we learned a week later, the Blues were not scouting the Penguins. They were scouting, it was Winnipeg scouting St. Louis. I always get them confused. Yeah, Winnipeg snatched Stastny from St. Louis. Anywho, I've got that story completely mangled. When you work so much, it just kind of all runs together. And where in the world is that trade board for me to show you? I wanted to, let me just do a quick Google search here. There we go. 20 players who could be moved. If you're just joining us, we've already kind of gone through the Derick Brassard stuff to catch you up. Patience is wearing thin, and you very well may see Derick Brassard, his name come up in conversations. Certainly, the whispers have bounced off the wall. Some second-hand sources are starting to talk. No first-hand sources, and that's an important distinction. Second-hand can give you an opinion. Now, that opinion carries a bit more weight, but when we get first-hand stuff, we'll actually report what we know. For now, I'll just tell you that second-hand sources are starting to talk a little bit about what the Penguins might be thinking, what they might be doing. And Derick Brassard's name is certainly one to watch. Let's have some fun. Let's just veer off the Penguins here for a minute. There are 2 players in Columbus. Artemi Panarin and Sergei Bobrovsky. Now, what in the world are the Blue Jackets doing hanging on to both of these guys? just going to tell you straight up. Look, the Steve Stamkos model works 1 in 5 times, 1 in 10 times. It doesn't work very often. Where the Steve Stamkos model, of course, is when you hang on to a player all season and you just keep hoping and hoping and hoping that after he takes his little dinner tour the week before July 1, that he decides to stay with you. If a guy gets to that point, he's gone. 80, 90% of the time, he's gone. And so here are the Columbus Blue Jackets, who have finally built a damned competitive team. They are still stout and solid. They're missing that key player, right? They're still missing a straw that stirs the drink, or I don't know. They just haven't been able to climb into the Penguins and Capitals league so much just yet. Thought they did last year when they had that 2-0 lead in round 1 over Washington. You can't let your Vezina Trophy winning starting goaltender walk for nothing. You cannot let one of the game's premier snipers and wingers, Panarin, walk for nothing. The Blue Jackets have to get aggressive, and they have to do so now before the market is flooded. In fact, they may have waited too long already. And when the other shoe drops, man, I hope it's not 10 more or 15 more years of darkness for Columbus. I love that rivalry. I love the fact that the Penguins have D.C., Columbus, and Philadelphia, all competitive and all heated rivalries. Doesn't that probably makes your fandom and your Penguins experience a lot more fun too, doesn't it? A good bit of healthy hate is necessary. Then we get to Matt Duchene. Again, Ottawa, what are you doing? By December, I would know if negotiation is something I do a lot during the day. I'm not all hockey writing. You need to know early on in the process if your goal is achievable. That some of these teams don't yet know if their goal of keeping a player is achievable is malfeasance. And I know I'm spanking some pretty smart guys here. Kekalainen in Columbus is a good GM, and Pierre Dorion in Ottawa has proven himself to be a pretty good GM as well. They've got some great young talent up in Ottawa, Shabbat, etc. But if Duchene walks, Ottawa's just burnt toast. Given their arena situation and their tenuous grasp on that market, they don't have time to screw around. They're another team. Get it in gear. Because if Duchene walks from Ottawa, and if he hasn't signed by now, I've got to think that's the most likely result if Ottawa hangs on. You can't keep begging a guy. By this point, you have to know if his heart's in it or not. Same with Mark Stone up in Ottawa. Now, there is... I'm not going to pull up the tweet. I refuse to... I'm 90% sure that it's either a fake account or it's someone trying to pretend to be someone they're not. The account claims to be of a former scout of the Carolina Hurricanes, etc., pushing this insane three-way trade deal, Mark Stone, Phil Kessel, and it's amusing, don't get me wrong. But they were tweeting at me last night, just trying to goad me into retweeting it or giving them some pub. The only pub I'll give them is here and to laugh at them. Mark Stone is going to be a free agent. Why in God's name would the Penguins acquire a free agent to be and give up Phil Kessel? Tell me again why that makes sense. It doesn't. It would be silly. You could knock me over with a feather if that happened. But for a team looking for some top six scoring, Mark Stone is hugely attractive. And you look around the league, you look at Anaheim clinging to playoff competitiveness. If Anaheim didn't have John Gibson, they'd be front runners for Jack Hughes at this point. Gibson should they should put his name on the Vezina already. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Put Gibby on the Vezina. Heck, you might even put Gibson in the Hart Trophy conversation if Anaheim does indeed make the playoffs, because they are the Anaheim Gibsons. But if Anaheim can pluck a guy like Stone or Duchesne all of a sudden, well, they're pretty good then. You'd have to think that additional scoring. Same with Carolina. And I'm going to bag on Carolina a little bit. I feel like this is Festivus for me. I got a lot of problems with you people. Carolina dealt away Elias Lindholm in the offseason to get Dougie Hamilton, despite the fact they already had some young defensemen who were pretty good, Jacob Slavin. So now Carolina finds themselves in desperate need of offense. And so they're dangling the guy that they traded offense away, Dougie Hamilton. That's just bad organizational thinking. Whether that was Dundon, the owner, or GM Donnie Waddell, who was the GM of the Atlanta Thrashers. And you can judge what kind of job Waddell did with Atlanta, now in Winnipeg, because of the job. Look, I used to talk with Mr. Waddell semi-regularly when he was in Atlanta. Wonderful guy, but maybe his GM results are not the best. And so Carolina looks like they could be a real mess. But there's more players flooding the trade market, and Carolina is a real team to watch for the Penguins if they decide that they want a third right-handed defenseman. They've weathered the storm. Marcus Pettersson has allowed the Penguins to weather the storm with only one righty in the lineup. You're pushing Jack Johnson to the right side. Somehow Johnson and Pettersson have worked. So even though I like a guy, a right-hander on the right side, maybe you see Johnson become the 7th D. 6-7. There's a lot to figure out there with the Penguins. Let's get to Tricia is trying to send me a message. I guess she was swearing because Tricia, I apologize. YouTube has been held by YouTube. I have to approve that. Ellen wants to know. Actually, I guess she's commenting. Oh, I see. There's a chat going on here without me. Okay, no. Joshua corrects me. It was Thomas Jefferson and John Adams. It wasn't Hamilton and Jefferson. It was Adams. See, I was right the first time. Yep, they both died July 4th, 1826. Yep, Chris mentions Matt Murray, 8-0 since his return. So 34 minutes in here. Let's get to Matt Murray. And if you want, we'll go back to the trade big board here. Throw the name you want to talk about on the message board, and we'll get into it. But Matt Murray. Someone asked me last night if I thought Matt Murray was back. No. Matt Murray is better. I'm worried about recency bias, so I have to really dive into this, and I'll be writing a column on it the next couple days. This is probably the very best regular season hockey Matt Murray has played. Hands down, bar none. The last 4 starts of his have been beyond good. They've been spectacular. He was brilliant again last night. Was it St. Louis? Yeah, DeSmith played in Minnesota. Murray was brilliant in St. Louis. And he was brilliant again. If Matt Murray wasn't great last night, if Murray were average, that would have been a 6-5 hockey game, and we would have been spanking the Penguins all day long. But that's the benefit of having a franchise goalie, is when you don't play your best game, he can bail you out, and you saw that last night. That's another reason why I'm increasingly bullish on the Penguins' fortunes and their future. I dropped a couple hints today in the column about their attitude adjustment. If you haven't, do me a favor and check it out. I don't want to revisit last year too much, and I'm trying to find a way around doing that. Because look, last year you and I, me and the Pittsburgh Penguins fan base had this ongoing tension. Me sounding the alarm, saying this isn't right. The Penguins are not right. And Penguins fans saying, we don't want to hear it. Stanley Cup, 2-time Stanley Cup champion. And that was that was the year last year. They'll be fine. Kingerski, stop it. Well, it turns out they weren't fine. And that is, that was a huge problem. They allowed so many bad habits to creep into their game. Their game kind of decayed. And so when the Capitals came to town and shoved them, they responded, but they couldn't maintain it. They couldn't consistently play good hockey because they had spent 6 months playing garbage hockey. And they won games, sure, because they were just that damned good. But when a team, they're equal, and the intensity was raised, the Penguins couldn't do it. And the Penguins kept telling themselves, too. You'd walk through the locker room, you'd ask, kind of variations of similar questions, and the responses were patented after a while. We know how to win. We're a good team. We'll be fine. We have to play better, but this group knows how to win. All of, just keep massaging the words. They didn't. You can't coast. You can't skip the regular season. I know. Sometimes it feels like taking third grade all over again for the 4th time in a row. You already know your multiplication tables. Do they still teach those, by the way? But it's what's necessary to get to the Stanley Cup. You have to get through 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, Billy Madison. And eventually you find your Veronica Vaughn at the end, if you do all of those things right. I'm increasingly bullish on the Penguins' chances to get to Miss Vaughn. I think if Toronto would happen to beat Tampa in the Atlantic, I think the Penguins could take out Toronto. And I know the Penguins will have a war with Washington. And I don't think any other team in the Metro can give Washington or the Penguins a game in the playoffs. I think Capitals-Penguins, provided they don't meet in the first round, would be a guaranteed second-round matchup at this point. So at that point, the Penguins have the Capitals and Tampa, or Capitals and Toronto, and the Penguins' muscle can get through anybody in a 7-game series, especially with Matt Murray. And Murray, isn't back. He's better than ever. If that's what you're getting at, Chris, I hope a long-winded answer. What are my thoughts on fighting in the NHL and the cost of losing a player long-term like Zach Aston Reese? Yeah, that was... That's the cost of doing business, unfortunately. Last night, it wasn't so much about fighting. And I dropped this tweet during the game. Florida really unimpressed me to the point of being disgusted. Florida has a lot of talent. Florida should and could be a much better team than they are, but my gosh, they were terrible. And they're under 500. You need sweeping changes there. Clearly, the attitude isn't right. You can tell when a team gets down, they go cheap, and the game got cheap last night. And I knew somebody was going to get hurt, and I was hoping it was somebody I hadn't decided to write about. Unfortunately, my big column on the Penguins' fourth line with Aston Reese telling stories on Matt Cullen and Riley Sheahan laughing, really kind of getting up for his role as a fourth line left winger. I've got some great stuff from those three. I decided to wait until today to publish it. But with Aston Reese's injury, I have to kind of put that on the shelf for now. My thought is it's unfortunate, but if the fights weren't allowed, how cheap would the game have gotten? Aston Reese just has to learn not to punch a guy in the temple. The face, Zach. I think he kind of... Aston Reese was credited with a fight back in 2017 against the Devils. Pretty tough customer as well. But I think this was like his first real fight where he... who did he fight last week? Kind of took a few lumps. Who did he fight? Forgive me, drawing a blank. But I think he got a little bit of a taste for it and wanted to do it again. So when the opportunity presented itself, he certainly didn't turtle. And he won the fight pretty convincingly. Just the face, Zach. Hit the face, not the head. The face. Speaking of face, what do you think? Because I'm kind of... I'm in an Airbnb for a month while my apartment is being renovated. So I've got access to about half of my stuff. I just haven't felt like shaving. What do you think? I found the grandpa sweater in a bin. Can't find the other half of some of my clothes. I had friends walk into a bar, meet me for happy hour a couple of days ago. Didn't recognize me. That might be a good thing, huh? Maybe I'm not hideous, like the hideous chode. Yes, master. Look like Barney Feldman some days. Can't find my glasses either. So I think this is just about wrapping things up. Do appreciate everyone chatting. Trying to make sure I didn't miss any questions here. Oh, Alan asked if the Penguins have to trade, who goes? It really, it's so up in the air right now. You know what? If you've hung with me this far, and I see a lot of you have, if you've hung with me this far, I will drop this. Watch the Central Division. Watch a couple of the struggling teams. One of them is not St. Louis. That's, I think, all I'm confident in saying right now. There are three struggling teams: St. Louis, Minnesota, and Chicago. I don't think Chicago is really open for business. I think they're kind of getting to the young players. I don't know that they have a lot to offer teams. Their veterans are getting well paid. And I don't see anybody really picking up, making a run at a Duncan Keith. Really, do you? I don't. I don't see that. And Minnesota. Keep an eye on Minnesota. There's actually a handful of players that could affect the Metro Division. I could see Philadelphia taking a real run at Devin Dubnyk, couldn't you? Whatever it takes. But you've got Niederreiter, Charlie Coyle, and there's a surprise name you're going to hear out of Minnesota. I think his name will start making the rounds real soon. If my secondhand source is correct. If it doesn't happen, then I'll know they were tossing me an opinion. If I hear some firsthand accounts, and I'll share fully some of the stuff that we're hearing. And forgive me for having to kind of toe a little bit of a shady line there. I'll walk you to the forest with the pond, and I have to leave you there until I know with a little bit more confidence some of the craziness that might ensue. So, everybody, thank you. Oh, Medina's dead. Wait, what? What did I say? Oh, hey, Melissa goes, I could travel to Nashville with the beard. I could actually walk around Nashville without 3 bodyguards. Well, they weren't really bodyguards so much as they were hockey writers who would not have had my back had someone wanted to kick my ass. All right, kids, on that note, and kind of laughing at a hockey writer who might consider dropping the mitts. I have, actually. It's been a while since I've had to drop the mitts, and I hope I don't have to. But I earlier in my career, I had a fan corner me, just furious about the team nothing I had done, the team I was covering. Craziness, kids, craziness. All right, we will do this again next week. We're going to have some shorty videos. The other half of the studio is 95% complete, so we will dive into that. And we'll be talking about Chris Letang, Matt Murray, the Penguins trade wish list, shall we call it, and a whole lot more. And we'll do it in a few days. Check out PittsburghHockeyNow.com. It's been a blast. We'll talk again real soon. Have fun.